Yesterday was a really big day for the Rewildlife channel. I had my first interview with an expert. In this case, it was a wildlife expert, the amazing Susan Kerwin, founder of Bat Rehabilitation Ireland. A huge thank you to Susan again for agreeing to be my first interviewee. Susan dedicates herself to bats. She drives all over the country. I'm not joking. She drives all over the country, rescuing bats in need, bats who might have injuries or might be in buildings that need construction work done on them. She brings them back to her home in Limerick, where we shot the interview, and she brings them through the process of rehabilitation or working through their injuries, whatever that may be. And when they're well enough again, she drives them all the way back to the county that she found them in, and releases them in the area where she found them, which is just amazing dedication. Bat Rehabilitation Ireland is a charity, and at the end of the video, I will explain where you can make a donation for Bat Rehabilitation Ireland, and it's all voluntary. Susan does this all on her own accord, which is just so impressive, and we're so lucky to have people like Susan in the country. On a production note, this is a little bit of a longer video. It's sort of a podcast style, but we do have footage of bats and Susan's work throughout. And I'm afraid we had some sound issues during the making of the video as well. We are surrounded by, which is brilliant, surrounded by bat enclosures, as you would expect. But also there was lots of wild birds around us, because Susan loves to encourage, as we should, encourage lots of wild birds down into the garden. And so there's bird song all around us throughout the interview, but I don't think anyone who follows the channel would mind a bit of bird song to listen to while they're listening to an interview. So without further ado, let's go and learn all about the Bats of Ireland with Susan Kerwin. Hi everybody, today is a really big day for the channel. We have our first interview, our first expert. I'm down here in County Limerick meeting Susan Kerwin from Bat Rehabilitation Ireland. Susan, thank you so much for agreeing to be our first expert on the show. Thank you so much
for asking me, Jack.
Could you tell us a little bit, I guess, about yourself first, and your interest in bats and how Bat Rehabilitation Ireland came about?
The interest in bats came about when I was 27. Yeah. I was diagnosed with cervical cancer at the time. Okay. And my kids were very young at the time. They were 9 and 7. So it was extremely difficult, you can imagine. So I would find it very difficult at times to sleep. So I was suffering with insomnia. And at night I would go out and I'd sit in my back garden and I'd have a cup of tea and I'd just try and kind of mull over the day. Yeah. And it was just one evening that I noticed that there were bats flying out of the eaves of my neighbour's house. Now, I grew up in the same neighbourhood, so I knew everything as an animal lover. I knew everything that crawled or walked or climbed when it came to animals. But I'd never noticed that there was a colony of bats in the eaves of the house. So I sat there, and for a couple of hours I was watching them coming in, coming out, and it was just amazing. It just allowed me to stop thinking about my own problems, focus on something else, and I was just totally smitten with the bats. So just every night I would come back out, sit out in the back, and I would look forward to seeing what these bats were doing.
That's beautiful. So they gave you great energy and I guess encouragement in their own way.
It did. It just gave me a time to go back to nature, stop focusing on my own problems, and have that time of the day where it wasn't about what was going on in my life. So I was completely taken in with these bats, and it was just an amazing escape for me each night. So I wanted to learn more, got my bat detector, went online, bought all the books I could think about that I could find, and it just went from there. I reached out to see if there was anybody in the local area of Limerick that was interested in starting a bat group.
Wow, so it wasn't just an interest for you. You wanted to give back to the bats and go about setting up this wonderful setup that you have here today.
That's it. I felt that, especially at the time of COVID, when bats were getting such a bad rap, and everybody, all of the information that was in the news or in the media was so negative. I just felt like, okay, we need to do something positive.
Yeah, and I think that is one of I suppose the things that bats struggle with is that they're very misunderstood. People have all these kind of notions about them that maybe come from culture and from movies and from books and things like that, and we'll get into that maybe a little later. But I don't think people really necessarily know that we have as many bats as we do in Ireland, or even that they may have seen bats and not realised, because I know from my own experience, when they come out at dusk, sometimes they join swifts and swallows in the sky darting about, and you might just mistake them for being for being a swift or a swallow. Do you think that they are quite a misunderstood species in Ireland?
Oh yeah, definitely. And as you said, it is cultural. I think in Western culture, especially when we think of vampire movies and we think of Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Yeah,
bats were always seen as blood sucking or menacing, and that's where it would have evolved from. But even if we went back further, so as a Catholic, I would have always remembered that we had a picture of in our hallway of Archangel Michael, and he was slaying a demon. And in that painting, Archangel Michael was depicted with the wings of a bird, and the demon is depicted with the wings of a bat.
Yeah.
Now it's darkness and light, and we associate anything in the dark as sinister.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And I feel that when people realise that that the animal is, we have 9 insectivorous species of bat here in Ireland. None of them drink blood.
Yeah.
There are 3 species of vampire bat, but they're all found in Central America.
So sorry, you touched on something that I'd love to expand on a bit there, and that's bats as a species globally. Like they're really fascinating little animals in terms of how they have evolved, and some of them aren't that little. I think there are something like 1,400 species.
That's correct. Yeah,
globally.
over 1,400 species. I think it's 1,463 to date.
Whoa! Wow. Okay. And they've evolved to feed on all sorts of different food sources. They feed on blood. There's one species that feed on blood that became famous, perhaps for the wrong reasons. Yeah. Exactly. Most of them feed on invertebrates. And there are species who also specialize on fruit and even small mammals as well. But they have all the mammalian characteristics, right? So they have hair. They give birth to live young. But one thing that you might be able to help me expand on, the understanding their anatomy, is another characteristic that mammals have, which is our 5 digits, which across the spectrum of mammals has changed quite a lot. So we have the seals and aquatic mammals whose fingers extended and webbed to become flippers and help them swim. I think in like the kind of horse deer sphere, they're careful how you do this, but their middle finger extended down and the rest kind of reduced up, and they came to run on their middle finger, so to speak. But all the digits are there. But when it comes to flying, the only successful mammal to take to the skies, how did their 5 digits form to do that?
Yeah, so it went from them being, as you mentioned, gliding, to then having to travel greater distances.
Okay. So
it would have evolved over time to give them that extra.
I see. So they did start gliding, much like flying squirrels, inverted commas, and they started to flap, and eventually they evolved. So theoretically, in a couple of million years, we could have actual flying squirrels as well, if they follow the same path as bats.
Yeah, for them.
Very interesting. And here in Ireland, we have, you mentioned, 9 species of bat. Is that right?
So we have 9 insectivorous species of bat here in Ireland.
All insect eating.
Yeah. So we have 3 in the pipistrelle family. So we have the common pipistrelle, the soprano pipistrelle, and the Thusis pipistrelle, and then we have 3 in the myotis family. So that would be the whiskered bat, Daubenton's bat, which is our water bat. This is easily identified.
Oh, I think I've spoken to fishermen before who've mentioned that they've seen them gliding down. Do they? How do they feed? Do they catch insects off the surface of the water or
Yeah,
something?
so they'll scoop them off the surface of the water. They have very large feet, and with their tail membrane, they'll scoop them off the water. But they'll also take flying insects as well. But they're very easily identified by the pattern that they fly in. So it's a figure of 8 up and down the river, and only a couple of inches above it.
I see.
So very easy identify. And then we have natterer's bat, another species of myotis.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 3 other species. So we have the brown long-eared bat, which is our only species of long-eared bat.
It's a beautiful bat. Really, really interesting.
The most easy to identify.
Yeah.
With those ears taking almost as long as their body. So huge ears.
And do they have extra sensitive hearing because of the? I mean, all bats do, right? Have very powerful hearing, but they have even more powerful.
Yes. So if you look at an animal, if you look at any animal, and if you look at its features, so if an animal has really large ears, that tells us that sound is really important to that animal.
Yeah.
Whereas if it has really large eyes, we know that light is very important to that animal.
Exactly.
So the long-eared bat feeds on moths and other spiders and other insects that would be quite quiet.
Yeah.
In their goings.
Yes.
So it needs to be able to pick that up.
Yeah.
So it will hover. So it flies slightly differently. It will hover above the trees and the ditches, and it's looking for those sounds, and then it will actually glean them. So it will take moths from a leaf rather than in the air sometimes, and it will also take spiders from its web.
Oh, I see. And is that the only species of bat then in the country that doesn't only feed on the wing, or are there others that pick up feeds?
Whiskered bat will also take spiders, and natters will also take spiders from webs. Yeah, and then the brown long-eared bat will often fly off, and it will have a feeding perch where it will sit and it will eat. So you might go into a building or your garage or something and find lots of lacewing, the actual wings, or moths or butterflies even.
I have seen that. So that they actually that's bat activity where they actually disassemble the insects, eat the bits that they want, and then go off and find more again.
And then they leave the wings. So if you see a pile of them, that's usually brown long-eared.
It's a sign that you've got brown long-eared in the area. Yeah. Very cool. And I think is that 8 species so far? Do we have?
And then we have one more, which is our only species of horseshoe bat. It's the lesser horseshoe bat. And this is really easy to identify in that it's the only species that we have here in Ireland that hangs upside down. So it will hang upside down, but it will also wrap its wings around it. So if you think of the horror movies,
another kind of classic stereotype that was put on bats is from the horseshoe family only.
Yes, it would be from the Rewildlife, and they hang upside down and then wrap those wings around it. So.
Beautiful. And which is our largest species?
Lizards then would be our largest species.
And what kind of size would they get to?
Even at that, you're only looking at something between maybe 10 to 16 grams.
Yeah, I think that's something that is another misconception, because when you see photographs and video of bats, you kind of tend to see them up close, and you don't really get a sense of how big they are. But they're really, really delicate little small things, aren't they?
Yeah, their bones are so delicate. And even wing size. In the air, the lizard bat might have a 30 centimetre wingspan.
Which is our kind of, I guess, our most common, what people are most likely to come across on a daily basis, and which then is our most threatened.
The common and soprano pipistrelle are the most likely bat.
I love that name. Pipistrelle is just such a lovely word. Sorry to interrupt you. It'd be a great dog name or something, wouldn't it?
It's a beautiful
Pipistrelle, name. Yeah, it's great. Sorry.
So they're our most common species, and the most likely species that you will come in contact with. They're not as affected by light, so you will see them in urban areas as well.
Okay.
Even though they do like broad leaves and riparian habitat as well. But you will find them in urban areas.
Yeah.
And then really the bat that you're least likely to come in contact with is the lesser horseshoe bat. This species is only found across 6 counties on the western side of the country.
Okay.
And so it's found from Mayo down to Cork. And it is said to be of a population of about 14,000 at the moment.
Okay, but I mean, is it struggling then in that sense? Is it habitat loss, or what's the main factor in that?
Habitat destruction, habitat loss. Then you have like loss of roosts as well. Connectivity is a huge problem. So lack of, when you're losing like linear features, so because the lesser horseshoe bat echolocates at such a high frequency, it's at up at over 100 kilohertz, it needs to be quite close to the linear features to find its prey. So if we lose a stretch of trees or hedging a significant size, then those bats won't travel past that loss of habitat.
Okay.
So what happens then is they're concentrated in one area, and now today it's actually possible to test the DNA of a bat from Cork and a bat from Mayo and be able to identify where that species is found because of it. So that's quite dangerous even to the population in that. So loss of habitat is a huge issue. And then we have other issues like intensive farming, where there's overuse of especially insecticides. So that's a huge problem for all of our bats.
They get secondary poisoning from insecticides?
That's possible, but the lack of insects is the real issue. Because in Ireland and our weather, if the weather is quite wet, you're not going to have the bats won't have the ability to go out and forage for insects.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. But if the insects aren't there, they're not feeding on them. So we see, especially this year, a huge issue with bats coming in starving. From lack of insects.
Oh no!
So it's not just here in Ireland. It's been reported in France and in the UK as well.
Because there is a huge depletion in insect numbers, especially flying insect numbers, and I imagine one of their main food sources is moths, if they're nocturnal.
Well, they're feeding on other species of diphtheria as well. So you're feeding on mosquitoes, midges, lacewings, all of those, but all of those insects are affected. Also poor water quality. So if you have poor water quality, you'll see a reduction in bats in your area. But you're also going to see a huge reduction in insects that are feeding on, so that's what's the cause.
And I'd imagine light pollution is a big factor for bats as well, because it will affect their food sources who are attracted to light, and then maybe bring the bats in and they could injure themselves on a lighting fixture or a wall that the light might be on. But also, bats aren't blind. There's another complete misconception out there. There's plenty of misconceptions about poor old bats, but they're not blind.
They're not blind.
And so they must be quite effective when they're nocturnal and they need those lower levels of light by a big blinding bright light that may come out of nowhere for them.
Some species are very sensitive to light. The Daubenton's bat will completely disappear from an area once there's light erected in that area. You'd see this mostly on river walks. So obviously for safety, if there's a river walk put in, you're going to need lighting there for the people that are using it.
Yeah.
But that light pollution then means that we lose the Daubenton's bat.
Completely, they'll just leave the area.
Just leave that area, yeah. They'll move. And then the lesser horseshoe bat as well is very sensitive. So it's a very shy bat. So you won't find it around an area where there's a lot of human activity, but also a lot of light pollution as well. So there are species that are extra sensitive to light, and you will see that that species will just disappear from an area once the light's been erected.
Yeah. What sort of age group do bats live to?
Well, surprisingly, we have a species called Brandt's bat. Brandt's bat is a member of the Myotis family, so related to the whiskered bat and the Daubenton's bat. And it's been only a vagrant in Ireland, so we've only ever found and confirmed one individual. But these bats can live to be over 40 years, so 42 years
really?
Is the oldest that been recorded, yeah.
The tiny little mammal that can live to 42 years old.
Exactly, that's what makes them really unique, is that at only between 5 and 7 grams, because that's the usual weight that you'll find them at, these bats living that long. When you think of a small mammal like a rodent, then rodents live for maybe 12 months, 2 years maximum, and that's because they have really high metabolism.
Yeah.
But a bat has a really high metabolism as well, but it has a unique trait, which is have the ability to go into what's called torpor. The torpor is when they reduce their metabolic rate down so low, their heart rate, their blood pressure, everything is reduced, and it it's almost running on an energy saving function.
Okay, so it's a form of hibernation?
It's a type of hibernation. Torpor is a type of hibernation, but bats will go into it on a daily basis, and this is to reserve the energy from the food and the fat stores that they have been foraging on. So this is what makes them unique.
So that's how they get through winter.
Exactly.
And you mentioned the R word there, and I know that's another misconception about bats, which there seems to be plenty of, is that they're rodents, but they're absolutely not rodents at all.
No, bats are actually more related to primates than they are to rodents.
Wow.
Rodents are, well, when we have bats, or calls about bats, when people will call in and say to me, we have bats in our attic, and my first question is, have you seen them?
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you haven't, have you found droppings there? Why do you think
What's
they're bats?
the sign? Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, we can hear them gnawing at nighttime. So that's not a bat. That's not a bat. That's a rodent. Bats don't use nesting material, so they're not going to be up there pulling a carpet or gnawing at wood trying to get in. They also roost within the eaves of your house or under the tiles. So in the new builds, these are ideal places for bats. Signs of bats are really the droppings, if you see them outside under the exit point of the roost and the entrance points, and noise. So noise from maternity roosts during the summer is really one of the indications to people that they have bats.
And what would that noise be like?
That's the juveniles. So it's a chattering sound. So it's a real kind of high-pitched chattering sound where they're communicating with each other. Apparently they're giving out to each other a lot. So science has started to record these sounds and the interaction between them, and they're relating it to that they're giving out to each other. So.
And do they have a lot of young? Are they similar to rodents in that way at all?
No, bats will only give birth to one pup a year. On rare occasions, they will have twins.
Wow, only one?
One a year. And then with female bats, they don't give birth until they're into their second year. So it's totally different. Where rodents are giving birth nearly every 6 weeks, and they're pregnant again.
Big litters as well.
Yes, exactly. So
that's a big difference in their numbers generally as well, and their ability to increase numbers across the country is that they only have one pup a year.
Exactly. And when you're losing roosts, you're losing generations of that family. Females will stay with females. So you'll have in one colony, you'll have grandmothers and mothers and aunts and sisters.
Wow! And do they like to stay in the same roost for generations as well?
Yeah. So they'll have multiple. So they'll have a maternity roost in the summer, and then they'll have satellite roosts. So once the pups get to an age where they're capable of flight, maybe 5-6 weeks, if that roost, for whatever reason, maybe it's too hot, maybe it's infested with parasites, they'll move to a satellite roost, which is another roost that they have.
Yeah.
So they'll have multiple roosts, but they will continue to return every year. If your roost site is suitable, they'll be back every summer. Should
we be concerned at all if we find bats in our environment or in our home? I mean, we don't have to be worried about them, do we?
No, we don't. A question that is really commonly asked is, will I get rabies if a bat comes into my house? And luckily in Ireland, we haven't had an indigenous case of rabies since 1903. So that is not a worry. Their droppings, the accumulation of droppings on the outside of your house is not a big issue either.
Good fertilizer, I've heard.
It's very good. The guano is really a good fertilizer, but there are ways to stop it from becoming a problem. You can make a little makeshift shelf underneath the entrance and exit point if it's accessible, and that will gather the droppings. So it's not coming down on your windowsill, it's not coming down on the pathway or anything outside your house. If you have bats in the attic, rarely when bats start to come into an attic space, if it's in an old house, you can also use that same system by putting down some plastic or a tray underneath that's gathering up the droppings.
I see.
And then you don't have to worry about that becoming a problem. So no, we don't have to worry. And a lot of the time people don't even notice that they're there.
Yeah.
I get calls from people, and it's only in the summer months when the young, as you said, are in there, they're chattering, they're making sound, that you're going to hear them. But people will often say to me, I never even knew I had bats. And that's because we don't tend to look up at night time.
They really like to keep to themselves, don't they? I mean, they're quiet, private little animals. They're not going to be...
They're very shy and very nervous.
Yeah. So they're not going to make their presence known. But there are things we can do, and this is what the Rewildlife channel is all about is helping biodiversity, and there are things that we can do to encourage bats to come and live in our garden or live near us. And one of those things we have here are bat boxes.
Yes. So bat boxes are a great way of providing a shelter for bats that are in your garden.
Yeah. So they're sort of like bird nesting boxes, an equivalent to, but they've got a different kind of
we have different
entrance.
Yeah, exactly. So these are what are called kint boxes. So they're self-cleaning. The bats will land here on the little landing pad.
Yeah.
They crawl up in underneath, and the droppings come out. And these boxes are easily made. There are great designs and plans online.
Can I have a little look?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So they climb up in here, and obviously then you have these little ledges the whole way through that they hang on to,
exactly.
and they can sleep on there. And
just a little landing pad where they can crawl up underneath.
I see. Okay.
You can also purchase these boxes, but something that you need to make sure before you purchase a bat box that it's suitable for bats. Paint is really important. It needs to be an animal-friendly paint.
Yeah.
You
Non-toxic.
can't put you can't put anything toxic in there. When you purchase the bat box as well, the diameters here of the entrance points needs to be checked. Something that's large. This is quite large. This bat box was purchased, so this is quite large. I can fit my hand up there.
Yeah.
So
is
my
that too
hand
large?
Exactly.
Okay.
So my hand can fit up there, then a bird can fit up there. And small garden birds will predate on bats.
Really?
So it's something that
I
people are always shocked about.
Yeah.
So they will. Yeah, they'll go in and they'll predate on bats. So you want to make sure that this entrance here is nothing more than, depending on the species that you would have. So I would have it at about 7 millimeters.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
7 millimeters would be maximum. Even the lesser horseshoe, even Leisler's bat, our largest species, can squeeze into 7 or 8 millimeters. So
okay.
So we don't want it any
that
bigger.
because even though they are a predator themselves and they are high up in the food chain, they're predated themselves. What kind of animals predate on bats in Ireland?
Birds, raptors.
Yeah.
There's lots of video footage that people would make where especially sparrowhawks will come in the evening time. They will sit at the side of the house just around dusk, and they'll wait for the bats as they come out. Barn owls as well, because barn owls and bats tend to choose the same roosting sites or older buildings if they can. Disused churches.
So,
they'll use
them. Come across each other quite a lot then.
So raptors, but when the bat is on the ground, it's open to predation by anything. And this is where we see a lot of issues, especially with cat predation. Yeah. Because cats that can have a huge impact on the size of a colony.
And on all small mammals across the world, cats do have quite an impact. And there's another kind of bat box, is there?
Yeah, so this is another bat box that you can use. This bat box then has a door on the front of it that can be used. These bat boxes are
much bigger,
designed to be cleaned. Yeah. Now, having a door that's accessible, only a licensed person can inspect a bat box.
So inspect and clean and everything, yeah.
Exactly. So if you are choosing a bat box, there are so many types. You can go online, you can buy them in a huge range and cost-wise, but I would be going for something that's self-cleaning and suitable. So they're just a couple of things to keep in mind. Keep in mind the entrance size, and also that if you are purchasing it, that it's non-toxic.
So if I acquire a bat box, where should I put it? Do I put it up on the wall of my house, or should I look for something else?
I would always put the bat box up where you have bat activity. It's most likely going to be used. If you're hanging it on a tree, you need to make sure that that tree is suitable. So it has to be clutter-free. And so the bat has direct access to the trunk of the tree. So if you have a tree with big overhanging branches, that's not going to be any good. So if you have nice access to the trunk, you can place it on that. Now, the bat box should be hung at about at least 4 meters high. Okay. And it needs to be south facing, so southeast, southwest.
Gotcha. So they don't want too much sun exposure during the day.
And too much.
And heat, right? Exactly. Of course, because they need to keep cool as well.
And it's always a good idea, if you are hanging your bat box, to hang multiple. So you can hang one south direction, maybe southeast, southwest, on the same tree.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and then you're giving them an option then during the day if it gets a little bit too
To
warm.
move if they need to. Okay, this is brilliant. And if I want to encourage their food source to the area, so more insects and flying insects in particular, what can I do to help that?
So really, the main steps that we should be taking is not using any type of
Insecticides, yeah.
exactly in our gardens. That is the issue. That's a real problem. So that's by just doing that alone, that's a huge step for insect life and for all of the animals that feed on them. But leaving a small wild area, you don't have to have a huge area. If you're living in a housing estate, or even if you're living in an apartment, there's things that you can do. So if you live in an estate and you have a small garden, just leaving one corner of that garden wild will encourage insects. It's also giving habitat for other ground mammals that are living in your garden.
Yeah, of course.
Plus, you can also do something small like a water feature. So you can put in a little pond, or even again, if you live in an apartment and you have a small balcony, there are brilliant ideas out there for large plant pots that you can make your own little water feature with aquatic plants.
Yes, I've seen them with made of whiskey casks as well, cut in half,
Exactly.
and they work really well. Do bats drink on the wing like swallows?
Yes.
Or they do? Okay.
Yes, they do. So they'll come down and have a little drink. We have a little pond at the front of the garden, and you'll see them sometimes at night.
Really?
Scooping in.
Fab. So nice, still, calm water, and they can come down and have a little scoop and continue looking for food.
So if your idea is to bring in the insects, once you bring in the insects, you're bringing in the bats.
In the bats, yeah.
That's it. So
and
focus
then
on the insects, what they need.
Add somewhere for them to live, and suddenly you have hopefully some bats in your garden.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I understand that at Bat Rehabilitation Ireland, you're involved in a lot of scientific and conservation projects across the country. Have you any of those going on at the moment?
We do. We're delighted to be involved in some incredible projects. One of the projects that we've been working on this year is with a Scottish arborist called Will Robertson. And Will has come up with this cutting edge idea, and it's to create natural roosts in living trees and in dead limbs.
Very good.
And this is by carving different size roosting crevices in trees that mightn't have a lot of ecological value, like conifers and other non-native species.
Yes, yeah.
And also in dead and dying limbs and trees. And with the situation with the ash dieback, as you're very aware of.
Yes, I have it on my own land, yeah.
This is going to be something that would be very beneficial to the ecology of your land as well.
I see, because the ashes, even when they die, but they're still standing, they can become roosting opportunities for bats. And I actually just did a video on ancient woodlands in Ireland. And I did note that, we have all the Norway spruce plantations across the country, but perhaps even in that situation, conifers like that could be used as roosting opportunities for bats.
Give them a higher ecological value. So what we did here this year then was we pioneered the project by setting up some natural roosts in the flight behind us.
Amazing. Can we have a look?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
And these natural roosts are of different variations in size. And what we did was, in the summer months, bats are placed within the flight. And this is just to get them flight fit again and to monitor especially with bat pups, that we're monitoring that they're capable of feeding and echolocating. But we can monitor which roosts that they're choosing.
I see. So you're gathering loads of important data there.
Really, and especially for Leisler's bat. So Leisler's bat is Ireland's largest bat, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
And the population is really strong here. So it's seen as a species stronghold. Ireland is seen as a species stronghold for Leisler's bat.
Fantastic.
But that's not the same in the south of Germany, where Leisler's bat is endangered. So this year, we've recorded that Leisler's bat chooses to roost in a deeper carved roost. So now that can be implemented in
Germany, and to help out their population.
This data now is going to be shared with them.
Brilliant.
Where the species is a very high conservation priority. So it's being involved in projects like this, it's great for us, because in normal circumstances you would not be able to monitor projects like this it would be nearly impossible in the wild. But having something like the bat flight means that we can have arborists and specialists like Will come here to start the projects. And this project then is going to be rolled out this year in Glengarriff National Park in cooperation with the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So
that's fantastic because, and well done, Will, for coming up with this idea because, you know, those certain species like Lyser's bat that you mentioned, it's much harder to gather data on them, right? Because they tend to live in woodland areas, and you're generally less likely to come across them.
We just don't have the records. We don't have the records
exactly.
And there's still so much that we don't know about. Even in Ireland, we don't know where some of our species go in the winter.
Wow. So this is a huge opportunity to start gathering data that we can use to help them out down the line. How do you, incidentally, find bats in woodland areas like that? If you need to go and find them for conservation, do you use some sort of echolocation device or sound device?
We use bat detectors, and the most common bat detector that you will come in across is something like this.
Okay.
It is a heterodyne detector, and what it does is it's tunable.
Mm-hmm.
It picks up the different echolocation calls of each species. So each species that we have here in Ireland echolocates at a different frequency.
I see. So you can use it you set it to, say, 50 kilohertz or something on those lines to find...
depending on the species. So if we went to, if we wanted to find the soprano pipistrelle,
mm-hmm.
we would set it to 55. And then I could tell you that that's soprano pipistrelle. If we set it to 45, we can say
that's how you do it.
Yeah, so it varies.
So you start to get a sense then of the numbers in that area. With devices like this. And are these accessible to the public? Can if someone's interested in getting into bats, could they find them?
Purchased online. This is probably the best type. The tunable heterodyne detector would be the best type to start with.
Yeah.
They're more reasonably priced.
Yeah.
You need to learn though you need to kind of train your ear to the sound that each bat produces. So there's a tonal quality to each bat. So I could set this detector to 35. And I will still pick up a common pipistrelle or soprano pipistrelle, but I need to know the sound. So we're listening to the tonal quality of that call.
Yeah.
So that's something you need to learn. But you can do that by reaching out to your local bat group. Here in Limerick, we have Limerick Bat Group. I'm on the committee there. We take people out for bat walks and we teach them how to use the bat detector in the hand and in the field. So you will have...
Amazing.
Yeah, so every county, most counties have a bat group. So reach out, and this is the type you...
So tell me a little bit about bat conservation in Ireland, because I think there's multiple amazing people like you around the country doing what they can to help Irish bats.
Yeah, so they're very different areas that people are working in. So in the conservation areas, we have ecologists that are out there and they're doing surveys and finding areas where the bats are where the colonies are based,
mm-hmm.
and then trying their best to get these areas protected while using citizen science, so working with members of the public to go out there, do bat surveys and find out where the bats are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Bat Rehabilitation Ireland, what we are doing is we are collecting bats, injured and sick bats that are coming in from across the country. We use transport volunteers. We get them into care. We provide them with veterinary treatment, rehabilitation, hand raising them. We do education within the communities and the schools. We're involved in multiple amazing projects with different institutes, trying to understand better the needs of the bats and what we can do to protect them in the wild. So there's a lot of people that are working in this, and I think the citizen science, the voluntary organizations are really like the bedrock of what happens here. And in rehabilitation, it's so important because we're on the front line. We're seeing all of the changes that are coming in.
Yeah.
And we can record it and we can share that.
Getting all that information, and you work the whole country. That's so impressive.
So we do, but so like this year has been amazing. So we have other people that are also working in the rehabilitation of bats. And we did a series of bat rehabilitation introduction courses, and we've got more people involved. So the goal is that every county in Ireland will have a bat rehabber, and that way it will alleviate a lot of the pressure from us, but it's also better for the animal because they won't have to travel a great distance.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the incredible work that you do on behalf of us and bats. But what should people do if they find, say, a bat that's injured or in trouble, or perhaps they need to do work on their house and they're aware that there are bats roosting there? Who should they call? What should they do?
If you find a bat that's in trouble, you can contact a wildlife rehabilitator like myself. So you can contact Bat Rehabilitation Ireland or look for your local wildlife rehabilitator, and always go for somebody that's licensed and reputable, somebody that has experience. If you find a roost that you have a colony roosting in your roof, and you needed to have works done on your roof, say, and it was really urgent, you need to make sure that you contact the National Parks and Wildlife Services, because all bats and their roost sites are protected in Ireland, and that means even if it's on your property, you have to reach out and you need to get a license to do those works.
Okay, so bats are protected by law in Ireland, so you're not allowed to just go ahead and
No.
disturb them.
You can't remove them, you can't injure them, and you can't damage their roost sites. So it's really important that you contact National Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah.
And then you'll have to have a survey done, which means that you'll have a conservation officer come out, they'll do a survey of your property, find out where the bats are, what species of bats they are, and then they'll work on getting you the derogation license. But unfortunately, the derogation license can only be issued to you at the end of the year. So you won't be able to carry out any works till October, November. So that's why it's super important. I always tell people, if you even think that you may have to get work done, get in touch with your conservation officer as quickly as possible.
And National Parks and Wildlife Service, I think, are npws.ie.
That's it. Yeah. That's really the information.
If you want to make donations to Bat Rehabilitation Ireland, where should we go?
We are always so grateful. So you can contact us on Revolut. You can send us a donation on Revolut, PayPal. You can also just donate directly to our vet. So we share all of those details on our Facebook page and on our website.
And what's the name? What's your website URL?
It's batrehabilitationireland.ie. And you'll also find lots of information there on gardening for bats, on bat box placement, and what to do if you find a bat.
Amazing. Susan, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being the first guest on the show. And thank you so much.
No, really grateful that you called.